Hi, I'm Miles Reed. I'm the author of this paper. I just wanted to tell you about it because when you search on YouTube for mountaintop removal erosion, you don't really find much of anything scientific. Uh, so I wanted to change that. This is an older paper from around 2020. I'm the first author, and it's called Peripheral Gully and Landslide Erosion on a Stream Anthropogenic Landscape Produced by Mountaintop Removal Coal Mining. It's kind of a mouthful. But I'm going to break down this paper so that anybody interested can understand it, and I'll put a link in the video description. So, who am I? Miles Reed. I'm a geomorphologist. That's someone who studies earth surface processes like landsliding, sediment transport, etc. Steve Kite, also geomorphologist, emeritus professor at West Virginia University. I got my PhD at University of Wisconsin. This was work I was doing during my master's degree. So at the time, about 2017 or something, no one had really done anything in terms of the geomorphology of these reclaimed mountaintop removal mines in central Appalachia. They were a big deal in terms of people protesting and stuff in the 2000s, but these are landforms that are going to be left in the landscape for thousands of years, potentially, and no one has to maintain them. No company or person has to maintain them in the future. So if they're eroding, that could imperil fish and other aquatic life forms as well as damage infrastructure. This is an area that's somewhat transitioning away from coal and trying to get into recreation, so tourism, and if their streams go bad from too much sediment, that would put a damper on them. So what I want to do is just describe this paper, like I said. So I'm going to go figure by figure, table by table, just kind of describe what's going on. So what's mountaintop removal? It's a type of surface mining where ridge lines are blown off the tops of mountains with explosives, and then they mine the coal out. So this excess rock kind of plumps when you blow it up and creates a lot of void spaces. So you got to push the rest off to the side of the mountain and bury headwater streams and kill everything. Once they build them up enough, they kind of go back and terrace them, and you get these sort of things called valley fills. They look like pieces of pizza standing off the ridge down into the headwater stream valley. And you can see they're quite big. I mean, this is a LiDAR topographic map. You call it shaded relief or whatever. And this is in meters, so it's a couple hundred meters. So the relief in this northwest corner is 200 meters from top to bottom. So these things can be pretty big, and mountaintop removals covered about 6,000 square kilometers in central Appalachia. So we're talking West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, western Virginia, and sort of north central Tennessee. It's kind of been ongoing since the late 70s when they enacted the Surface Mine Control and Reclamation Act. Previously, surface mining was pretty crazy, and they didn't do any sort of reclamation. So this was seen as something better. They were kind of actually getting reclamation into a new era here, and actually thinking about stability and not eroding and different things like that. But even so, if you don't do any maintenance on something, it will fail eventually. Okay. And what is LiDAR? It's high resolution laser scanning of the topography. You can, with a laser beam mounted on a plane flying around, and it allows us to see through the vegetation. And so it's pretty cool because you can just see everything in an area that's normally hidden by a bunch of trees. If you were just looking at a satellite image or an aerial image, you generally wouldn't see that much. Let's look at a valley fill a little bit more closely here. So this is one of those valley fills right here, and this is the top of a mine. Okay, I'm calling this the backfill on top of the mine. So, they blow the top of the mountain away, mine the coal, but they're moving stuff around, and eventually they spread some stuff back out on top of the kind of flattened mountain portion, and that's what this backfill area is. So there is a thickness of material up there as well. Normally, it's usually not very thick though. These I'm calling retention cells, just a collection of different pond-like forms. Some of them are connected, some are kind of non-connected, some of them directly outlet to the sides of the hills, which is going to be a problem that I'll talk about later. And a lot of times these ring the periphery of the mine. You can see them up here too, down here, different sizes, shapes, all sorts of fun. This is the face of the valley fill, this whole thing right here. So if something's occurring right here, it's happening on the face of the valley fill. They have these boulder lined drains going down the sides or in the center if it's West Virginia. The toe is kind of special because it's where the valley fill meets the headwater stream down below, and you have these natural side slopes which directly abut the valley fill. So how would you make one of these if you wanted to? Well, like I said, you blow up the tops of the mountains. Creates a lot of waste material, so it's a bunch of rocks. The rocks are generally pretty durable. It's like sandstone and stuff. So they figure they can just push them off the side of the mountain. And when they do that, they kind of tumble and kind of segregate by size, and eventually you kind of build up kind of a boulder drain, like a really coarse grained drain where the channel used to be, kind of in this headwater stream. And then you just kind of keep on piling stuff up, and then eventually you come in with heavy machinery and you make these terraces. So that's kind of the last part of it. Okay. So like I said before, this paper, no one had really written in a peer-reviewed journal about any sort of field work. People looked at streams below valley fill catchments, but most work had focused in on how mountaintop removal altered downstream ecosystems and hydrology, which was mainly for the worst in terms of ecosystems, and kind of complicated in terms of hydrology, where the fills were kind of acting as sponges, and you would have more water in between storms flowing. Kind of interesting if you'd ever want to look into that. So we got access to some reclaimed mines. Reclamation here just means that they created the valley fills, they terraced them. They also revegetated them, and they waited long enough for them to be at a level of performance needed by the regulators. So the people from the West Virginia that kind of oversee mining in West Virginia came in and said these look okay, and then they sat there for a while, and then West Virginia bought them, bought the land. They were going to do some elk restoration, so we got access to that, and it's kind of semi-public at the time. I don't know if they're public now. And I walked down 21 catchments. This is near Logan, West Virginia, in Holden, just down the road from Logan, and walked down 21 valley fill catchments, just looking for gullies. Took the LiDAR, took that laser-derived topography in the field, and just looking for problems: landslides, gullies, seeps, any sort of weird issue they may be having. And just to get familiar, if you don't know what a gully is, it's just a stream channel where none should exist. It's generally caused by changes to the land. Farmers often have to deal with them, but they can also happen when you do mining. One reason we thought there'd be gullies is because other people, places like Spain, places like Australia, when they do surface mining and create landforms like this, they tend to see gullying because water just finds you out. Like, people cannot design drainage systems well enough, it seems like, when they use these reclamation techniques. Water is just too tricky. Okay, and this is a like a steep, rugged landscape where landslides are pretty common, but they're infrequent, like in the same locations. So this is rugged West Virginia, and I'm going to be looking not only in the field, but at LiDAR data sets across West Virginia and in Kentucky. Boom, boom, boom. And here's the LiDAR data sets, a little bit of description about them. They generally have about the same amount of mining. This is the Mountaintop Removal Valley Fill. It's an acronym. And they're generally about the same amount, a little bit less in some, more in others, but none were completely covered by it or anything. And these are some of the bins that we put gullies in. So this is sort of a gully classification system. We started seeing enough that we're like, not only do we have to kind of put the locations, but whether, what sort of gully is it, because we saw different ones. These are retention cells, and this is a gully kind of emanating from that, going down slope here. These are slope shades, so dark colors are steep and light colors are white. Here we have a mining road and then a gully. Roads they're oftentimes associated with gullies. You just get water accumulating on the surface of a compacted road and it just runs off. And you get a gully. This is the backfill area, so this is the top of a mine, and you have a gully caused by maybe some sort of seepage or something, almost like a spring coming out of the edge of the mine. And here we have a valley fill with two enlarged drains and a gully on the face. So these drains, although they're boulder lined, they can't handle everything, and you can erode around boulders. Like I said, water is real tricky. And these are some indicators of landsliding. So you can see rough topography or smooth, and the more areas unaffected by landsliding. You can see that the landslide is taking a bite out of the edge of a mine. It's the top of it. That's the edge. These landslides are outlined here, but they're going over top of a road right through here. And these are valley fills right here, and you can see a big scarp that shouldn't be here. And you can actually see displacement in some of them as well. It's a pretty big displacement. So this is sloughing off the hill, bulging down here. So it's not completely failed and like slipping all the way off the mountain. But, I wouldn't be surprised in time if something like that happened. So this is some field pictures. So I saw this in the LiDAR and made sure to look at it when I got in the field. That location, sure enough, the LiDAR was right. There is a gully here. It's caused by overtopping of this retention cell here. This star is the approximate location of the gully. And just showing some kind of crude outlines of the top of the gully and the bottom of it. You can see that it's not currently occupied by a stream or anything. It's just got branches and leaves. So this probably doesn't happen all that often. It may just have happened once. Or, it may have just been a one-time thing, but could happen again in the future. And this is 3 meters wide, 1 meter deep. So that gave us confidence when looking at the gullies and the LiDAR that these are definitely what we're seeing. You can observe them quite easily. And just another one. This one was caused by intentional discharge from these retention cells up here. Instead of overtopping, these just had a drain pipe that just came out and just sprayed all over this hillside, which had no natural stream. So it just ate into the soil and maybe even a bit of rock. And even had some landslides at the bottom here. So this is about 5 meters wide, so it's a little worse. And it's about 74 meters long, so it's a pretty big thing overall. All in all, you had 1,300, 1,342 gullies. Most of them, just by number, were in Kentucky, I believe. By density, definitely in Kentucky. Talcum had the most at 5.0 gullies per square kilometer. Most of them, 50%, were due to these retention cells. So either that overtopping or the intentional discharging from those. And then the rest kind of, there's some variation in what they were doing. More on the, in Kentucky on the valley fills. And there was a general increasing pattern from east to west when you start getting into Kentucky, except for this West Virginia one, which kind of stood out. And it's due to some old valley fills. Yeah, Kentucky had 82% of the valley fills occurring, or gullies occurring on valley fills. This is just a simple linear regression of mined area and the number of gullies. The outlier is the Talcum data set. And it just tells us that mined area is a pretty decent predictor of the number of gullies across the region. And this figure just emphasizes that the gullies are predominantly associated with the periphery of the mined landscape, and this is in the Talcum, Kentucky data set, so Perry, not Breathitt County, Kentucky areas. So I observed a total of 347 landslides, and the Varney, Kentucky data set had the highest density of landslides. Kentucky also hosted over 90% of the slides within valley fills, so 31 of 34, so that's pretty interesting. And these were the first recorded observations of landslides in fully reclaimed valley fills, so they've gone through all the government checks and whatnot. Previously, government inspectors had seen this occur, but not after everything's said and done like this. So this first one is just showing that the density of landslides can be quite high in some areas. This is in Varney, Kentucky, and this is in Talcum. I believe this is off a tributary of Troublesome Creek, and this is a severely disrupted valley fill. You can see that it's losing all semblance of its terraces and whatnot. It's almost involved the entire thing, and people actually live down below it. Okay, so the discussion section is just where we kind of break down what we observed and think about why we're seeing what we're seeing, and also give people kind of ideas for future studies. Saying what we'll do, perhaps, or what others should be doing if they're interested in these. So similar to drainage systems along forest roads, when they're, kind of logging, which have been known to cause gulling if unmaintained, these cells, these retention cells, accumulate water in areas that aren't used to it, kind of high up on the landscape. And if they're intentionally discharging or if they're being overtopped, it's an easy way to cause gully erosion. And gully erosion is not very common in Appalachia just because the soils generally absorb all the rainfall before it has a chance to cause kind of overland flow and erosion from that overland flow. So I saw 4 mechanisms of gully initiation in the field: overtopping, overtension cells, intentional release from cells. We already saw that in those field pics. But I also saw seepage erosion in the field, and this is kind of weird. This is from the supplemental materials of this paper. And we're looking up at a valley fill face, kind of nearest to the toe, and this is actually water coming up from out of the ground to the surface, causing this kind of failure, this seep, and then it's causing a gully below it, like a little one coming towards us. And this is a measuring tape that's been extended to 1 meter. So it's kind of interesting. It looks like they can almost form springs in the fills, which is kind of is not good. These are things that the inspectors look for and consider to be a bad thing, because if they're occurring near the toe, they could change the stability of the valley fill. And also I saw this sort of mechanism where they could overtop the terrace. So you could fill up a terrace basically and it could overtop. Because you get ponding up here on these terraces. They're not exactly flat. They kind of angle in towards the slope above. So this is the top of a valley fill. And this is a slope coming down. Here's the terrace and here's another slope. So what you have here is a little wetland forming in that pocket right there, and they can get, stuff, sediment and plants can get gunked up right here and, cause water to stop flowing, and then you can get ponding, because they generally want the water to flow outward if the drains are on the side, or towards a center drain if it has one of those. But if that stops, you can have this ponding. And you can imagine if it's raining, you have a big storm, you can pond it so much that it overtops and flows out towards the next slope. And you can almost get like a cascade going down. All right, but why is it happening more in Kentucky than West Virginia? It could be, several reasons. One we honed in on, and there was some studies that showed the mine spoils are weaker and more weatherable in Kentucky. So, they're easier to erode, basically. And there could be differences in reclamation practices. There are different government bodies overseeing these reclamations. So that's always a consideration. And also, landslides, the same relationship with mine spoils could be said to be causing the difference between Kentucky and West Virginia. Also, when engineers design fills, they do something called stability analysis, but it doesn't really account into how the materials evolve over time and how they weather through just physical weathering, just big rocks turning into small rocks through like freeze thaw, or chemical weathering where the minerals inside a rock changes into something else. And that's kind of an issue because these fills have been shown to weather pretty rapidly in some cases. All right, but why is it important? Why should someone care? Both gullies and landslides can produce a lot of sediment, which eventually can make its way into streams, and sediment is a form of pollution. It can change the grain size distribution of stream channel beds, which is important for bugs and the things that eat them. So think of like a cobblestone stream. If you put a bunch of silt in it, you could kill all the bugs in there, basically. So far, no one's really linked any sort of excess sediment from mining erosion in this region to ecosystem decline. I think it'd be a really good study because we have a lot of good spatial data sets now. You would have to wade into some deep hollers though, but it could be a good study. So that's it. I saw a bunch of erosion in the field and in the LiDAR, especially in the LiDAR. But there's still a lot to do. Still a lot of field studies that could be done in like investigating one of those big fill failures or something, or the aquatic ecology study I mentioned. Lots of stuff can be done towards that. I've been looking at a lot of new LiDAR in Kentucky to see if these gullies and landslides are continuing to erode and spoil, or if they are, quite badly. So keep a lookout for that research in the future, and that's it. Thanks.